The radio crackled to life at 11:47 p.m., jolting me from the uneasy quiet that had settled over my patrol car. 23 years on the force, and I still felt that familiar knot in my stomach when dispatch called during the witching hours. Unit 47, we have a welfare check at 1247 Elm Street. Elderly resident, neighbors report screaming but no response at the door. I keyed the mic with trembling fingers I hoped dispatch couldn't hear shake. Unit 47, copy. En route. Elm Street. Even the name sent ice through my veins. 3 officers had requested transfers after working this beat. The 4th had quit the force entirely, muttering about things that couldn't be explained in incident reports. Things that made grown men wake up screaming. I'd been patrolling these streets since I was a rookie, fresh out of the academy with dreams of serving and protecting. Those dreams had slowly curdled into something else entirely, a grim determination to survive each shift and make it home to my family. Because in this city, especially on the night watch, you learn that there are things lurking in the shadows that your training manual never prepared you for. The streetlights on Elm flickered as I turned onto the block, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with malevolent purpose. My headlights swept across cracked sidewalks and overgrown lawns, illuminating nothing but creating the sensation that everything was watching me from just beyond the light's reach. 1247 Elm Street stood like a wound in the darkness. A Victorian-era house that had seen better decades, its paint peeling like diseased skin, shutters hanging at odd angles like broken bones. The porch light was out, they always were on calls like this, leaving the front entrance shrouded in an impenetrable black that seemed to swallow my flashlight beam. I sat in the car for a moment, engine running, trying to summon the courage that had gotten me through 2 decades of domestic violence calls, drug busts, and armed robberies. But this was different. This was the kind of call that made veteran officers suddenly remember they had paperwork to catch up on back at the station. The radio squawked again. Unit 47, status report. Unit 47, on scene. Beginning welfare check. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I killed the engine and stepped out into the oppressive night air. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since I'd left the station, not unusual for October, but this cold felt different. It crept through my uniform and settled in my bones like a parasite. The neighborhood was too quiet. No dogs barking, no televisions flickering through windows, no late-night traffic humming in the distance. Just an absolute silence that pressed against my eardrums until I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my chest. I approached the front porch, each step groaning on the weather-warped boards. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing peeling paint and broken lattice work that created gaps perfect for something to hide in. Something to watch from. I knocked on the door. Police. Welfare check. Nothing. I knocked harder, the sound echoing through the house like gunshots. Mrs. Patterson? This is Officer Morrison with the city police. Your neighbors are concerned about you. Still nothing, but now I could hear something else, a soft scratching sound, like fingernails on wood, coming from somewhere inside the house. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I pressed my ear to the door. Scratch. 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 Rhythmic. Deliberate. Patient. I tried the door handle. Locked. Standard procedure would be to call for backup, but something deep in my gut told me there wasn't time. The scratching was getting louder, more insistent, and underneath it I could swear I heard something else, a low moaning that sounded barely human. I radioed in my position and intent to enter through the back door, then made my way around the house. My flashlight beam danced across overgrown bushes and forgotten garden ornaments, creating a landscape of twisted shadows that seemed to shift and writhe when I wasn't looking directly at them. The back door was ajar. Every instinct screamed at me to wait for backup, to call in the situation and let someone else handle whatever was waiting inside that house. But Mrs. Patterson could be in there, hurt, dying, needing help that only I could provide. It's what we signed up for, to run toward danger when everyone else runs away. I drew my service weapon, surprised by how heavy it felt in my hands. 23 years of carrying it, and it had never felt this inadequate before. Mrs. Patterson? I'm coming in. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, weapon raised, flashlight steady. The beam illuminated a kitchen frozen in time, dishes still in the sink, a half-eaten sandwich on the counter, a cup of tea with a film of mold floating on its surface. But it was the smell that hit me first. Sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in water. Like something organic breaking down in places it shouldn't be. I'd smelled death before, car accidents, overdoses, domestic violence gone too far, but this was different. This was wrong. The scratching sound was coming from upstairs now, directly above my head. Slow and methodical, like someone, or something, was trying to claw its way through the floorboards. I keyed my radio. Unit 47, inside the residence. Suspicious sounds from the second floor. Still no contact with the resident. Static answered me. I tried again, but the radio was dead. In 23 years on the force, my radio had never failed me when I needed it most. Technology doesn't just break down without reason, especially not when you're alone in a house that feels like it's digesting you from the inside. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed toward the second floor, each step announcing my presence to whatever was waiting above. My flashlight beam preceded me, revealing a narrow hallway lined with family photographs whose subjects seemed to watch me pass. The scratching stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own breathing, ragged and too loud. I could hear my heartbeat, thundering against my ribs like a caged animal. And underneath it all, I could hear something else, a wet, sliding sound, like something being dragged across the floor. "Mrs. Patterson?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts. "This is the police. I need you to respond if you can hear me." The sound stopped. Then, from behind the door at the end of the hall, came a voice that made my blood freeze. "Help me." It was barely a whisper, so faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But there it was again, stronger this time, filled with such desperation and terror that it bypassed my rational mind and went straight to every protective instinct I'd developed over 2 decades of police work. "Help me. Please." I approached the door at the end of the hall, weapon ready, every nerve ending on fire with adrenaline and dread. The door was slightly open, revealing nothing but impenetrable darkness beyond. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm here to help you. I'm going to open the door now." I pushed the door open with my foot and immediately wished I hadn't. The room was wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. The proportions were off, the angles didn't meet where they should, and the darkness seemed to have substance and weight. My flashlight beam disappeared into it like it was being absorbed, swallowed by something hungry and patient. But in that brief moment before the darkness consumed my light, I saw her. Mrs. Patterson was in the corner of the room, or what had been Mrs. Patterson. She was pressed against the wall in a position that human bones shouldn't allow, her limbs bent at impossible angles, her head twisted so far around that her face was pointing in the wrong direction entirely. And she was still alive. Her eyes tracked my movement, wide with terror and pleading. Her mouth moved, forming words that came out as that same desperate whisper, "Help me. Please." But there was something else in the room with her. Something that had done this to her, something that was still there, watching me from the darkness that my flashlight couldn't penetrate. I stumbled backward, my training warring with the primal terror that wanted to send me running from the house screaming. But even as I retreated, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's voice following me, growing stronger, more insistent. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Help me." I made it to the hallway before my legs gave out. I slumped against the wall, trying to process what I'd seen, trying to make it fit into some kind of rational framework that wouldn't shatter my understanding of reality. People don't bend that way. People don't survive with their bones twisted into geometric impossibilities. People don't plead for help when their vocal cords have been relocated to places they were never meant to be. But Mrs. Patterson had been doing all of those things. The house groaned around me, settling in ways that old houses do, but the sounds seemed too deliberate, too purposeful. Like the building itself was aware of my presence and was deciding what to do about it. I forced myself to my feet and tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. My cell phone showed no signal, even though I'd had full bars when I'd arrived. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were coming from the room I'd just fled, slow and uneven, like someone learning to walk with bones that no longer fit together properly. Each step was accompanied by a wet dragging sound, as if something was being pulled across the floor behind the walker. I ran. There's no shame in admitting it now, 20 years later. I ran from that house like the devil himself was chasing me, and maybe he was. I crashed down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door into the night air that felt like salvation compared to the suffocating wrongness inside that house. But even as I ran, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's voice calling after me, growing louder with each step I took away from her. "Don't leave me. Please. Help me. Don't leave me alone with it." I made it to my patrol car and sat there with the engine running and the doors locked, hyperventilating like a rookie on his first domestic violence call. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely key the radio when it finally crackled back to life. Unit 47, report your status. Unit 47. I had to clear my throat and try again. Unit 47 requesting immediate backup and ambulance at 1247 Elm Street. We have a situation. How do you explain it? How do you tell dispatch that you found a woman who should be dead but isn't, twisted into a shape that defies anatomy, trapped in a room with something that your training manual doesn't have a protocol for? Unit 47, specify the nature of the situation. Elderly female, severe injuries, needs immediate medical attention. And I paused, knowing how this would sound. Request additional units. Multiple units. Backup arrived 12 minutes later, the longest 12 minutes of my life. I sat in that patrol car, watching the house, waiting for something to move in the windows, for shadows to shift in ways shadows shouldn't shift. The house looked normal from the outside, just another old Victorian that had seen better days. But I knew what was inside. Officer Sarah Chen was the first to arrive, followed by Sergeant Williams and an ambulance crew. Chen was good police, smart, thorough, not easily rattled. She'd worked the night shift for 8 years and had seen her share of the strange and disturbing. "What have we got, Morrison?" she asked as she approached my car. I got out on unsteady legs, trying to figure out how to explain what couldn't be explained. Elderly female inside, severely injured. I stopped, realizing how insane it would sound. "She's in bad shape. Real bad shape. You need to see for yourself." Chen nodded and drew her weapon. Williams followed suit. The three of us approached the house together, the ambulance crew hanging back until we secured the scene. The back door was still ajar, exactly as I'd left it. We entered with tactical precision, clearing each room methodically. The kitchen was exactly as I remembered it, dishes in the sink, moldy tea, that sweet smell of decay. But when we reached the second floor, the door at the end of the hall was closed. I stared at it, feeling my heart rate spike. I had left that door open. I was absolutely certain I had left it open. "Mrs. Patterson?" Chen called out. "This is the police. We're here to help you." No response. Williams tried the door handle. It turned easily, and the door swung open to reveal a perfectly normal bedroom. Clean, tidy, with a bed that had been recently slept in and clothes laid out for the next day. There was no sign of Mrs. Patterson. No sign of the impossible angles her body had been twisted into. No sign of the darkness that had swallowed my flashlight beam. "Morrison," Williams said quietly, "where exactly did you see the victim?" I stared into the room, my mind reeling. Everything was different. The proportions were normal, the angles met where they should, and late moonlight streamed through clean windows, illuminating a space that looked like it belonged in a home decorating magazine. She was. I pointed to the corner where I'd seen her broken form. Right there. Against the wall. She was. But how could I explain what I'd seen? How could I describe the way her limbs had been bent, the way her head had been turned, the way her eyes had tracked my movement while her mouth formed those desperate pleas for help? Chen and Williams exchanged the kind of look that cops give each other when they think their partner might be losing it. I'd given that look myself, to officers who'd seen too much, who'd let the job get to them, who'd started seeing things that weren't there. "Let's check the rest of the house," Williams suggested diplomatically. We searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. We found no sign of Mrs. Patterson, no evidence of struggle, no indication that anything unusual had happened in that house. But I knew what I'd seen. The official report stated that we'd responded to a welfare check at 1247 Elm Street and found no one home. Neighbors later informed us that Mrs. Patterson had been visiting her sister in Toledo for the past week. The screaming they'd reported must have been cats fighting in the alley, or teenagers playing pranks, or any of a dozen mundane explanations that don't require you to question the fundamental nature of reality. I never worked another night shift after that. I requested a transfer to day patrol, citing family obligations and a desire for better work-life balance. The request was approved without question. The department was always trying to accommodate officers with families. But the truth is, I couldn't face another night in that patrol car, driving those streets, knowing that somewhere in the darkness things were waiting that shouldn't exist. Things that could twist a woman into impossible shapes and keep her alive to beg for help. Things that could make doors close themselves and rooms rearrange their geometry when you weren't looking. Chen worked the night shift for 3 more months before requesting her own transfer. She never said why, but I noticed she'd started carrying a second flashlight, and sometimes she'd call for backup on routine calls that shouldn't have required it. Williams retired early, 6 months after that night. 30 years on the force, and he walked away from his pension because, as he told me over beers at Mallory's pub, some things you can't unsee, Morrison. Some things change you in ways that don't heal. I've tried to rationalize it over the years. Stress-induced hallucination, sleep deprivation, the power of suggestion combined with an overactive imagination. But explanations like that don't account for the physical evidence I couldn't ignore. The scratches on my forearms, thin parallel lines that looked like fingernails had raked across my skin. I hadn't noticed them until I got home that night and my wife asked me what had happened. I had no memory of being scratched, no explanation for wounds that were too precise to be accidental and too fresh to be old. The smell that clung to my uniform, that sweet floral decay that washing couldn't remove. I eventually had to throw the whole outfit away because even after multiple cleanings, it still carried that wrongness, that scent of something organic breaking down in places it shouldn't be. But most disturbing were the dreams that started that night and continued for months afterward. Dreams where I was back in that house, climbing those stairs, approaching that door at the end of the hall. But in the dreams, when I opened the door, Mrs. Patterson wasn't alone in the corner. There were others. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all twisted into impossible positions, all pleading for help with voices that came from throats that had been relocated to accommodate their new anatomies. And standing among them, orchestrating their positions like a conductor leading an orchestra of agony, was something that had never been human at all. In the dreams, it would turn to look at me, and I would see that it had been waiting. Waiting for someone to find them, waiting for someone to witness what it had created, waiting for someone to understand that there are forms of existence beyond life and death, beyond the comfortable categories we use to make sense of the world. And then it would smile, or perform the action that passes for smiling when you don't have a face in any conventional sense, and I would wake up screaming, my wife shaking me awake while our children cried in the next room. The dreams eventually stopped, but I never forgot the lesson they taught me. We are not alone in this world, and the things that share it with us don't always follow the rules we assume govern reality. I see them sometimes, even now on day patrol. Shadows that move independently of their sources, shapes in windows that disappear when you look directly at them, people walking down the street whose reflections don't appear in storefront windows. But it's worse at night. That's when they're strongest, when the barriers between what is and what should never be grow thin. That's when officers disappear during routine patrols, when patrol cars are found empty with the engine still running and the driver's door hanging open. That's when good cops start drinking too much, or eating their guns in department parking lots, or simply walking away from careers they'd planned to retire from. The official reports blame stress, marital problems, financial difficulties, all the usual suspects that destroy police officers from the inside out. But those of us who've worked the night shift know better. We know that some resignations can't be explained by pension analyses and psychological evaluations. We know that there are things lurking in the spaces between streetlights that have been waiting far longer than human civilization has existed. Things that view our neat categories of life and death as amusing suggestions rather than fundamental laws. Things that collect broken people the way entomologists collect butterflies, pinning them in positions that display their beautiful agony for an audience of one. I still drive past 1247 Elm Street sometimes, usually during daylight hours when the house looks normal and harmless. The city condemned it 2 years after my welfare check, citing structural instabilities and code violations. It stands empty now, windows boarded up, yard overgrown, slowly surrendering to entropy like every other abandoned building in the city. But late at night, neighbors still report seeing lights in the windows. Moving shadows that suggest occupancy by something that doesn't require electricity to see. And sometimes, When the wind is just right and the night is particularly quiet, you can hear sounds coming from inside. Scratching sounds, like fingernails on wood. And underneath those sounds, if you listen carefully enough, you can hear voices calling for help. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, pleading with anyone who might be listening to please not leave them alone with it. But no one responds to those calls anymore. The city stopped sending patrol cars to that block after the third officer requested transfer and the fourth quit the force entirely. We tell ourselves it's budget constraints, personnel shortages, more pressing priorities in other parts of the city. But the truth is simpler and far more terrifying. We've learned that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Some invitations, once extended, can never be withdrawn. And some things, once seen, change you in ways that make it impossible to unsee them. Mrs. Patterson was never found. According to official records, she's visiting her sister in Toledo indefinitely. Her mail is forwarded, her bills are paid by automatic bank transfer, and her neighbors have stopped asking questions about when she might return. But I know where she is. I know she's still in that room at the end of the hall, twisted into angles that human bones shouldn't allow, calling for help that will never come. And I know that she's not alone anymore. Because every cop who disappears during a night shift, every officer who walks away from the force without explanation, every good person who vanishes from the streets after dark, they all find their way to that room eventually. They all join the collection, adding their voices to the chorus of pleas that echo through the darkness. And somewhere in that wrongness, something that was never human listens to their beautiful agony and smiles with satisfaction at another successful acquisition. I tell myself that I'm safe now, working day shifts, staying away from the places where shadows move independently and doors close themselves. But late at night, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I can still hear Mrs. Patterson's voice calling to me across the darkness. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Help me. And I know that someday, when my guard is down and my defenses are weakest, I'm going to answer that call. I'm going to find myself standing in front of 1247 Elm Street with a key I don't remember acquiring, opening a door that should have stayed closed forever. Because that's what it does. It waits. It calls. And eventually, everyone who's heard that call finds their way home to the collection, where they can be arranged in positions that showcase their beautiful desperation for all eternity. The only question is when. I pray it's not tonight. But I can hear the scratching starting again, just at the edge of hearing, and I know that time is running out. For all of us.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.